Lesson 4. Good morning. Beautiful weather. Today we are going to continue. Last week we went into the ideas of burial, Jewish burial. We went into the topic of the sanctity of a body. We went off a little bit of track, and people were discussing, had lots of questions regarding cremation and organ donation, all topics that are important, and hopefully we can discuss those in other classes. Today we are going to focus on the mourning period, what we call Shiva. The course does not really go into actual burial rituals. However, I said last week that I will briefly address those. So we discussed, is okay, should we get the mic on? Mic? All right. Okay. All right. Better this way? No. Better this way? Yes? No? Oy vey. Okay. Oy vey, I can do stand-up comedy and I have a mic. Okay. Somehow it's... Okay, that's better. Picks up my voice a lot better. Okay.
Now I can go back there.
Yeah. Is it too loud?
I'm sorry.
Better. Test 1, 2, 3. Goodness. I only like to use the mic when I have to scream at my children.
Maybe this sound is not good.
Because of the mic, right? Okay, listen up. The mic just passed away. We mourned the mic, and I'm going to speak louder. How is that? Okay. And if you can hear, bring your chair on the row 2. Row 2. All right. The funeral we spoke in the other class is actually mainly is to help the deceased to transition to the next world. And the tradition that we do, the rituals we do, are all interconnected to that journey. We did not yet touch about the big question about afterlife. We all kind of like talking about as if I already assumed everybody just knows this information. The Jews believe in afterlife. When I said yes, but we didn't talk about really what is afterlife, what is paradise, what is hell, what is reincarnation. We are going to focus on that in the last class next week. So remember, I said I'm extending the course, so we don't have to rush through. Next week will be the last, and if it's not the last, we'll do another class. You know, it's a little bit more coffee. You're getting more for your money worth. Everyone's happy. The idea is that the body is sacred. The body is like the vessel that hosts the soul that was given to us on loan. The bodies don't belong to us; it belongs to God, and we are guardians of the body. Hence, we're not allowed to damage our body. We need to stay healthy. We're not allowed to cremate a body. It's not ours to cremate. And it also goes against the concept of our belief in the afterlife, which we did not talk, which we'll get to. During a funeral, I mentioned that there will be that the biggest mitzvah is actually to escort the body, right? Why? Because we are lovingly bringing back the person to its resting place. The soul is traveling between the body and the Shiva house in the beginning. It's very confused. And when we sit around the body and we treat the body with utmost love and respect, it comforts the soul that the soul is not alone. All right. Now, about grieving. So we talked much about the deceased. Now we're going to talk about more about the mourners. All right, let's open up text 3 on page 173. And the question is mourning appropriate in Jewish? Is appropriate or not? Is mourning appropriate? Is mourning appropriate? Is it suggested? Is it voluntary? Or is it an obligation?
Wow.
It's appropriate and maybe an obligation for the Shiva while we're sitting as an obligation.
It's an obligation. You're saying it's an obligation. Okay, but why is it an obligation? Is mourning important? We say obligation. We call it a mitzvah. It's a requirement. But why is it a mitzvah? Why is it important? So first we're going to contrast to Greek philosophy. In Greek philosophy, we see here in this text that Socrates, I know him from the German one, has made fun of the concept of death. To him, it was the end of everything, and there's nothing to mourn about. There's nothing to mourn about because there's no meaning to the concept of life and death. Look over here in text 3. He had a conversation with his students before he died. He was put to death because he made fun of the youth. He was put to death. He was given some type of poison, and as he was dying, they visited him in prison. And in the conversation, he asked his disciple Cebes to relay the following message. And this is text 3. Who wants to read for us? Text 3. Neil. Text 3. You're in the middle.
Sure. Tell this to Cebes and bid him be of good cheer. Say that I would have come after me. Say that I would have him come after me if he be a wise man and not tarry, and that today I am likely to be going, for the Athenians say I must. Simeus said, what a message for such a man. Having been a frequent companion of his, I should say that as far as I know him, he will never take their advice unless he is obliged. Why, said Socrates, is not even as a philosopher? I think that he is, said Simeus, then he, or any man who has the spirit of philosophy, will be willing to die, but he will not take his own life, for that is held to be unlawful. The day may come when you will understand why, though a man is better dead, he is not permitted to be his own benefactor, but must wait for the hand of another.
All right, so you understand the word he wrote, right? In short, okay, thank you.
Don't kill yourself.
I'm not a Greek philosopher, but in short, he says that a true philosopher does not mourn death because one who seeks death is basically the removal of the shackles of the body. He looked at actually as life as a limitation, and because you're limited to a body. So he says any man who has the spirit of philosophy will be willing to die, because when you die, the spirit goes way, 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 way bigger, so to speak, right? In the body, it's limited. Almost sounds like Jewish idea, right? Where we said that soul is trapped in the body, correct? So, in a sense, according to if the body is limiting the soul, why we know that the soul is going to a better place, right, or a greater place, because it came from heaven and returns to heaven. So why mourn death? Why do we mourn death? Maybe we shouldn't mourn death. Some people don't mourn death. Some people actually say it's a celebration, right? Celebration of life, it's called. Well, yes, they're still mourning. Actually, it's a beautiful name. It's nice because, so we want to know why does Judaism disagree with the philosopher's stance and say we need to mourn? Mourning is a big part of it. Look over here in. Let's start the Jewish text about mourning, text 4a, page 174. All right. And this is from Nachmanides. He writes, the Torah does not disallow mourners to cry, because it's a human nature to be moved to tears when taking leave of loved ones, even if they're still alive and merely traveling to a distant location. So the most basic level, it's a human nature that when you lose somebody, right, you cry. If somebody leaves for a long time, you cry. So the Torah addresses that and accepts that. Number two, my mind is continuous, because that's just on the basic level. Maimonides in 4b writes, mourners find comfort in crying and in wallowing in their sorrow, to the point that the body is weakened by the intense emotions, in the same manner as happy person finds contentment in various forms of amusements.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? What did he just say? What did this text add? People cry. That's an expression of emotion, right? Right, where people get weakened by their mourning or by crying. The same way, the opposite, when somebody is happy, right? Then what happens? They're in a better mood. They're. Sorry, I lost the people here.
Do you have a choice, Sat? Do you have a choice? Are the mourners?
The mourners have a choice to mourn or not. We'll see. We are required to mourn, and we'll see soon how. We know Shiva, but it's not a optional. You must mourn. Okay, so basically saying, I think my mind is adds to text 1. Not only it's a human reaction, but it's also an emotional reaction, right? That is a psychological benefit of mourning, right? I need to express myself. That's important. Just like when you're happy, you express yourself. You don't want to hold yourself back. It's unhealthy. Mourning is healthy psychologically. So you have reaction, number 1. Number 2, my mind is a psychological benefit. And Torah values that. And one more text 4c, from Rabbi David ibn Zimra, who lived in Spain and Sfas, who was a mystic, and he writes as follows. It was a question. One of the great men of the generation lost a son and did not shed a single tear. Is this a praiseworthy reaction? Answer. Such behavior is offensive and objectionable and demonstrates heartlessness, distasteful character, and cruelty. This is the way of the philosophers who maintain that this world is worthless, and as such death is not a major concern and not worth bewailing. We who have received the Torah believe that this world is of great value for those who properly utilize their time here and behave appropriately. It is only through our actions in this world that we merit the world to come. Crying, mourning, and shedding tears after the passing of a relative, and especially for an honorable person, is the way of the pious, the prophets, the people of good deeds. It is not for naught that our sages tell us 3 days for weeping, 7 for eulogies, 30 for observing the restrictions on wearing new clothing and getting a haircut. If weeping were improper, the sages would not have instituted a 3-day period for this. We see that our father Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and weep for her. Genesis 23:2. And we also find that Jacob, King David, and innumerable others mourned the passing of loved one. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
so back on text 4b,
Yep.
when we talk about mourning, weakening the body of the mourners, what about the body of the deceased?
Meaning?
Is our mourning weakening the body of the deceased? Is the body of the deceased animated in any way by?
Excellent question. The question is our mourning animated or have a relation to the body of the deceased? The answer is it has more relationship to the soul of the deceased, not the body of the deceased. But we do know that body and soul always remain connected. So by extension, it also has an effect, like you're saying, let the person rest in peace, right? We want to let go so the person can rest. Are we talking about the body or are we talking about the soul? What are we talking about?
Yeah, what are we talking
Huh?
about?
So we learned that they're interconnected. It's not, this body and soul are not just two completely separate entity. They are real. It affects each other. So just when I'm alive, right? When I'm alive, and I eat something. So when I eat something, it affects my body, but it also affects my soul, right? So if I make a blessing, then my soul gets affected by the food I'm eating, because I'm connecting now to the soul power of the food, because food also has a soul, and it also affects my body. That's why it's important to eat kosher. Kosher is the diet for the Jew, meaning Hashem has prescribed what to eat. What does eating have to do with God? Well, soul and body go together. And if something is spiritually kosher, physically kosher, they interconnect. Eating something non-kosher damages not only my soul, also my body, because my body is a vehicle for my soul. So this is all the goes together. Good question.
So we want the body in the grave to be weakened.
Not weak. Oh, you're saying about weakened, like weakened, like you feel tired and weakened? No.
Weakened like it says in the text.
No. First of all, it doesn't say. It says in the text 4b, right, that there's a benefit to cry. He says the word is. Where are we?
Yeah, and wallowing in the sorrow.
There's a benefit, right?
Right.
What they find comfort.
Yeah, that's to the mourner.
There's a relief. When you cry, there's a relief. You find comfort, you're able to cry. People sometimes who have a hard time crying, and then it comes to the boiling point, they cry, they feel a relief, right? And the crying weakens the body, but doesn't mean the crying must weaken the body. To the point that it can even weaken the body, that is a relief. But it has nothing to do with weakening the body of the deceased. Of course not. No. Okay, yes.
It's a sad question, but I mean,
Oi. I'm going to ask anybody not to ask side questions respectfully, unless it's really, because we're not going to be able to move on. We have to cover, right? But at the end, by the schmooze, we'll talk further. Let's go. All right, that's what we're schmoozing. I mean, it's not that you could ask questions, but it should be more, we're on the topic. Moving on. So we see that according to Torah, physical life is very valuable versus what the philosophers believe, right? So death, the physical life, is very valuable because we learned the only way you can do a mitzvot, the only way you can make tikkun olam is being in a physical body in a physical world. That's the mission. That's valuable. That is now lost. We mourn this great loss. And with this perspective, we understand why it's not just a benefit psychologically, emotionally, but also it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah, an obligation. Text 5, Maimonides. We are commanded to mourn the passing of next of kin. All right, it's a requirement. It's not like, okay, I'm so sorry, I cannot sit shiva, I got to go to work. Right? It's not an option. It's an obligation. So how do we mourn? How do we mourn? So we look here in the next. We eat. Yeah, exactly. That's achenvei. 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 This has been another continuation from last week's Bubba Mice episode, right? Is the whole a lot of things we do in Shiva. Not only is it a Bubba Mice, meaning it's a myth, but also it's actually contrary to the obligations and the traditions of Judaism. I'm going to say things that you might not know. My biggest thing, one of my things that really, I didn't grow up in an observant community. So I grew up in an observant community. So I've seen what's done in a Torah observant community. Coming to a non-observant community, I'm sensitive to people's rituals and preconceived mitzvahs. But what's the biggest mitzvah, American mitzvah, after the funeral? Huh? Eat. Which restaurant are we going to go? Right? Which restaurant they're going to go? And we're going to see today, it is so contrary to what Shiva is all about. But before we get to that, let's look at 4 steps in Jewish mourning. 4 steps in Jewish mourning. So, a person passed away. Let's. You have it on 177. You have a chart. Let's move on here. Okay. The first is called aninut. It's probably the least known word in the mourning period. Called aninut. What does aninut mean? It's from the moment of passing until the interment. This is the most intense phase, I'm reading the chart, of mourning. At this point, we do not even attempt to comfort or console the mourners. During this period, the next of kin are absolved from all positive mitzvot, obligations to do something such as pray or don tefillin. Nothing shall detract or distract from the mourner's pain and the interment arrangements. Sometimes during the aninot stage, the mourner's tears the outer garments as a sign of mourning, which we're soon going to talk about the tearing of the garments. So that's the first part. Person passes away. From the moment of passing till burial, the mourner is in a state of aninut, which actually in Torah we have Torah law, and then we have Rabbinic law, right? Rabbinic laws are not, a Rabbinic mitzvah is not the rabbi made it up, Rabbi Schmerling. It is actually how many mitzvot, how many Rabbinic mitzvot, how many Torah mitzvot do we have? Not 10, 613. Okay, that's a lot. 613. Okay. Well, we're not going. I don't want to go into this, but just we have 7 rabbinic commandments. One of them we actually observe today. Today is the new month. Today is Rosh Chodesh, and on Rosh Chodesh we say a prayer called Hallel. We praise Hashem. What are the other rabbinic mitzvot? Lighting Hanukkah candles, celebrating Purim, washing your hands. From the Torah, the most important part of the mourning period is the first day of death, or the day of burial, which is aninut. Shiva is the oldest minhag, is the oldest custom that was adopted by Moshe. When Moshe passed away, the Jewish people mourned for 7 days. Because it was adopted by the Jewish people and was written in the Torah, it became like a biblical mitzvah, although it's not technically, but it's considered the importance. It's not so important the difference. Anyways, Shiva. What's Shiva? 7 days, mourning period, commencing with interment. The mourners stay in the house of mourning and do not work. The mourners sit on low stools, wear the torn garments, and do not wear leather footwear. During Shiva, it is a mitzvah to visit the mourners and attempt to comfort them. Then you have Shloshim, 30-day mourning period, commencing with interment. After getting up from Shiva and resuming the everyday routine of life, certain mourning practices are continued until 30 days elapse from the time of burial. These include refraining from wearing new clothes, getting a haircut or shaving, and participating in festive events. So that's the first 30 days. It's not like Shiva, you can go back to work, but you don't take a haircut, don't wear new clothes. Just an interesting episode that happened this week. The president of Israel, Boogie Herzog, is not an observant Jew, but he just lost his mother about 2-3 weeks ago. He went on the first presidential visit to the UAE, to the United Emirates, 2 days ago, and got a royal reception. It was a big deal in the Middle East, and with the crown prince. But you look at the picture, he has like he's not shaven. So he explained to the crowd this custom of not shaving for 30 days because he is in the Shloshim period. 12 months. 12-month period, mourning period commencing with interment after the passing of a parent. Some of the Shloshim mourning practice, such as not participating in the festive events, are continued by the children until 12 months have passed. It's customary to have a candle burning in the home of the deceased during the 12-month period. Huh?
I didn't know. I thought it's only 7 days.
The candles.
Yeah, I mean the candle.
Yes, the candle is a custom. It's a custom, It's not required, meaning it's not an obligation. Some people do 7 days, some people do 30, some people do 12. When it comes to a mitzvah and obligation, there are no different opinions on the matter. It's black and white. You have to sit 7 days shiva. No one's going to come say, "Oh, only do 3 days." I mean, that's not Jewish law. When it comes to customs, however, there are different customs: Sephardi, Ashkenazi, all different kinds, right? So that's fine, because customs are things that were adopted together as a community to express something. All right. Let's talk about tearing Korea. A mourner is always amazing. Okay. It's just a distraction. A mourner, right? While the truck is here, I'll use the mic. Okay. A mourner has to tear his garment, his or her garments. It's called kriya. What's the origin of tearing your garment? Look in text 6. The brothers, this is the story of Joseph. The brothers slaughtered a goat and took Joseph's tunic and dipped it in its blood. They sent the colored tunic and brought it to their father, and they said, "We have found this. Identify whether it is your son's tunic or not." Jacob recognized it.
The sound is distorted.
Okay. Jacob recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured it." Joseph has been torn to pieces. Jacob rent his garments and put sackcloth on his loins, and he mourned for his son many days. Right? So we see in the biblical times from our forefather Jacob, when he thought his son Joseph was dead, that he torn his garment as an expression of his pain. The Torah adopts this idea that mourning, as we learned early in the text 4, we need to also emotionally express the pain. There's a benefit for that, right? So when you tear a garment, that's an expression of I'm in pain. I'm in pain. Okay, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. We have a truck commercial. Torah recognizes that we're not supposed to stifle our emotions. We need to express our pain. And the Torah gave us the vehicle to do so. In one way, the mitzvah of actually tearing the garments. Now, that is something that is, again, something that has been changed, unfortunately, especially in American culture, with the superficial black ribbon. Okay, you all know about the black ribbon, right? Black ribbon
With the bottom.
is made up by the American funerals, right, to use as a substitute of the requirement and actually I would like to say the word beauty or powerful experience of tearing a garment as an expression of the loss. And soon we're going to see another reason why we tear the garment. But actually, let me just not demonstrate, but tell you how we actually tear the garment and which garment. Which garment. So the mitzvah is, it should be a shirt or the lapel of a suit. It should not be something that is superficially put on, like a what's it called, a ribbon. A shawl is also okay. Some people do whatever they have on, until their heart, the actual body, is exposed.
For women too.
Women too, in a modest way, yes, women too, but women should not be the idea of exposing the body part is not part of it. I just said what people do, but as a minimum is to tear the most outer garment. Interesting. For a parent, you do on the left side over the heart. For a sibling, on the right side. Who, by the way, is required to sit shiva? Who is considered next of kin that have an obligation to sit shiva? So it is parents, mother, father, sibling, sister, brother, and daughter and son. Should never have that. Those and spouse. So there's 7: mother, father, brother, sister, son and daughter, and spouse. 7. The Torah talks about 7 next of kin. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to sit shiva or not allowed to do certain things for a grandmother or a grandchild or a cousin, but you're not obligated. The others are obligated. We see that in Torah, how Torah describes these next of kin. So again, so only for a parent we do over the heart, a spouse and sibling and children on the right side over here. How do we do it? Not by we actually have to tear it with your hands, and you should tear it at least an inch or 2. Typically, what we do is we make a little incision with a scissor, so you can then tear. I cannot tell you how many times at a funeral I have witnessed, including myself, that the tearing is a very powerful moment. Just the noise of tearing a garment, it brings your emotion and the whole concept into very strong contrast. Which is, I know. I'm sorry, because it's actually healthy. It's very healthy. So don't go for the. And it bothers me that America has kind of substituted something so powerful to a very superficial ribbon. In addition, that you are also not fulfilling the mitzvah. And people say, well, I don't want to ruin my shirt, right? I don't want to ruin my shirt, right? They're just ready to spend $10,000 on a mahogany coffin, right? But then they are cheap on a 99-cent shirt that they can pull out, a t-shirt that they can pull out. Okay.
So,
Yes.
true or false? You
Yes.
can't recycle your Shiva shirt and keep ripping in new places the same shirt.
You should be wearing the ripped shirt throughout the shiva, and if you can wash it or change it, then you should rip it. You should rip a second one. Correct.
I'm saying
What are you
then
saying?
the next funeral it has to be a new shirt again?
Well, it's not.
That's my question.
If times are really, really bad, then call me again. I'll help you. No, you should not. It's not something you keep. You typically recycle
Every time
recycle
you
after.
need a new garment to rip for new Shivas is what you're saying.
Yes, and I hope there's not that many times. You're ruining much more. Every time you go in the yard, you're ruining your garments a lot more than the once in a lifetime shiva or a few times. Anyways, understood on this? But there's one more important meaning behind it, and let's skip to the meaning, and I want you to skip to text. What are we having? Go text 9. Jump to text 9, page 182.
Oh, that's mine.
On page 182, text 9. Often within their pain, the mourners have an underlying belief that it isn't true, that their loved one hasn't really gone. This is not just denial. In a way, they are right. Death is not an absolute reality. Our souls existed before we were born, and they continue to exist after we die. The souls that have passed on are still with us. We can't see them, but we sense that they are here. We cannot hear them, but we know that they hear us. On the surface, we are apart. Beyond the surface, nothing can separate us. So we tear our garments. This has a dual symbolism. We are recognizing the loss that our hearts are torn. But ultimately, the body is also a garment that the soul wears. Death is when we strip off one uniform and take on another. The garment may be torn, but the essence of the person within it is still intact. From our worldly perspective, death is indeed a tragedy, and the sorrow experienced by the mourners is real. But as they tear the garment, we hope that within their pain, they can sense a glimmer of a deeper truth, that souls never die. Beautifully written.
Yes.
So if souls never died, then why do we sit Shiva?
Ah, good. That's the whole class. Just everything we talked about till now. If souls never die, why do we sit Shiva? Because we learned that we are mourning the value that there is while being in this world. There's an intrinsic value of being in this world, doing our mission, and when that is finished, we mourn that was lost. We don't mourn and we don't wallow in our mourning forever, because we combine our belief in the soul's continuous life while we sit Shiva. We take acceptance of the grief, we mourn, we accept it, but we also take the pain and channel it in a productive, positive way, that this is not the end. We continue to live on with them, as we're going to see further. Clear? Okay. Any questions on this specific topic before we move on?
Yeah.
Yes.
I got one thing. I somewhere in my life, I was taught that for the first 3 days, that it was okay to ask why, how could this happen, and so on. But after 3 days, it's I don't know if obligations.
You read it right here in the text I just skipped.
Oh, sorry.
Text 7.
Well, I guess I learned something right.
There you go. So text 7. Why don't we read us text 7? Then that's just text 7. Go ahead.
Oh,
Page 179.
Neither cry for the dead nor bemoan him. Neither cry for the dead more than necessary, nor bemoan him more than what is prescribed. What does this mean? For 3 days weeping, 7 days for eulogies, and 30 days for prohibition against wearing new clothes and getting haircuts. More than this, God says, you are not more compassionate than I am.
What does that mean? What does it mean to you? Yeah, what does that mean? What does this text mean to you?
It's like everything else. There is a time for everything, and that it's not healthy, actually, to wallow in that deep grief that comes in the first part of the process.
Right. Exactly. It is unhealthy. Torah doesn't want a person to wallow in the grief forever. Torah wants you to mourn. As we said, we know psychologically it's extremely healthy to mourn. But also Torah wants you to mourn not only psychologically, also for the spiritual loss. But it wants to eventually you to move on. Hence, the 3 day, 7 days, 30 days, each milestone allows us to kind of say, okay, now I finished this period, I can move on. Now, everybody mourns differently. Not to say that it's only mourn 7 days and then everyone say, hey, stop now, don't do it anymore. Everyone is different, no one alike. However, the Torah gives us kind of the idea not to wallow. And by the way, somebody who cannot move on, who's stuck in their grief, it's a real thing. It's really important that you get the guidance and help to mourn. Mourning is, we have bereavement groups and stuff like that, but obviously there's the healthy mourner. Everybody mourns and cries and mourns, and then you have somebody who can become, clinically depression and stuff like that. For that you really need to get professional help. I always say that. Don't use a class like this as your this is what I'm going to get healed with. If you have a real problem, seek real help. But again, yes.
So for soul, I'm sorry.
Yeah, one second, yeah.
After the soul is released from the body,
Yep.
right,
does that soul, is he still my soul Lee, or is that soul something?
So next week. I'm keeping the coffee hot for that. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm teasing everybody.
For soul of body,
Yeah.
the first 3 days for that. So first 3 days, it's very important for soul of that person. not
Important
just
to what?
morning.
To morning. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
7 days.
Well, we said here we're talking about for today's class we're focusing on the mourner. Last week we talked about that it helps the soul. Remember the soul who comes back to the Shiva house, even if it doesn't have children. The rabbi who put together a minyan. It helps the soul to transition. Now we're focusing more on actually the mourner itself, but it all goes together. All right. Now, how do we find comfort? Okay, we said okay, got to mourn, but how do we actually find comfort, right? So, if I'm gonna ask two people, how, based on what we all learned, how do we find comfort when we lose a loved ones? What can I tell myself?
I will tell that I know you will be fine, you will be better than here when you will in heaven. Yeah.
Okay,
He's in a better
By talking about the person and remembering the good times.
but remembering the good times. Okay, huh? You know that he will be close to God. Okay. But how does it help you? That helps the person, kind of like, okay, he's in a better place. I'm not in a better place. I lost them. I lost my loved one. I'm not in a better place. Huh? Life goes on. Okay. I mean, again, it works for some people. Some people that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Life goes on. And by the way, very important. Never ever teach others what you have learned as a